This piece was, it's a billboard, and it was actually, it was a billboard in a part of London with a big BMW advert on it. And then these artists put on like workman like jackets, like they were from the council, and then they went and removed it and broke it down, brought it to the gallery, and then remade it and took all the images off of it. It's hard to see what these paintings are, but as I say, it's just to give a sort of overview of it. And the artists range in they're sort of standing in the artwork. So the sculptor here is a very well-known professor, Philip de Barlet, and she teaches at a lot of the big London art schools, and she's a very well-known artist, and sort of quite late on in her career. The artist who's done the paintings is also actually a sculptor, but she was one of the students of this tutor, so they have quite a nice, quite an interesting dynamic, an interesting relationship. This was the first and only piece where the two artists actually collaborated together as well. So they on the same piece. So it's a sculptor and a painter, and well, it's fairly obvious who did what, but the sculptor made this ground in a way for the painter to view. They're oak, solid oak timbers. This was, these are my works in the show. I decided if I was running the gallery, because we sort of live show by show in terms of money, like could we pay the rent? If we can pay the rent, we would do the next show, which is a bit like that, but for a few years. And I always decided that if I could see the end of the gallery, I was going to give it up at some point, and stop running it. Then I would give myself the last show with another artist. So I got to that position, which is good. And these, you'll see a bit later where these come from, but there was a project I did this time last year in Kyoto, in Japan. And it was similar with what I'm doing here with Cellini. It was a residency. It was based at a university there. And this is the other guy that I'm showing you. So around this time, my practice had really broadened, and I was doing some performance work, sort of sculptural performance work, and urban interventions, and I was sort of making paintings and sculptures. And I think the key was that now my studio was based where I was working, and I had much more control over my time, so I could get more studio time. And then, so therefore my practice started to change again. So it's always being affected by external forces, which is quite key to how I work. So I was still on the Russian club there. So this is the one curated show. Before then, they'd mostly been just pairings, and then this was based on an idea of artist furniture. In 2010, I did a project. I was employed on the project, working with Tadashi Kawamata, a Japanese artist. I'm up there by the table, and he made this, with some students and myself, made this floating canal boat meditation room. So he always uses this same type of timber, and there were little gaps between the planks as we built it, and then you sit inside and it floats, it just bobs around, and then the way the light comes in is really beautiful. It's this sort of meditation idea. But what I remember was that when all the wood arrived, the first thing he asked us to do was to design and make the table and benches up in the over on that side. And then every morning we would sit there, and he would say what the ideas he had in the hotel the night before, little sketches. Then we'd take lunch there, and then at the end of the day we'd sit down there and talk about how the day had been and what we might do the following day. It was over a 2-week period. And then at the end of the project, that just disappeared, and we're left with this floating boat. And I always wondered what happened to that table and benches, because it had been a real part of the community of that project. So 10 years later, I'm running a gallery, and I want to do a furniture show. So I got in touch with the artist and said, could I remake his table and benches, but with volunteers from the Russian Club Gallery? And we design it to accommodate our needs. That was made. We measured that to the length to fit all of the workers on. So then the show that's up and coming was that I'm going to show you was all programmed around this table and benches that we built. And then unlike in this example, that table and benches we built then went into the gallery as part of the exhibition. Like that. So these are counterbalanced shelves. So they're all on one bracket. So you have to just then choose the objects and place them perfectly to balance these. And then that's myself with the designer of the Russian Club and a couple of interns and some photographers working out how to make this table and benches. And they weren't used to building things, so it was quite a nice experience. Okay, so as I say, being at the Russian Club has given me time to then develop my own, to make my own sculptures, time to sort of develop ideas rather than just making them on the street on the way to work. So it was the beginning of a series called Maverick, and it's made out of found picture frames, and it's a chair. It's not a functional chair. It's the sort of the idea of a chair, or the memory of as I remember, a chair, certain chair being, and then it's just held together very precariously, but they hold their own weight. And then I just developed this series as a more modernist take. And they become very much about proportions and scale and space and negative spaces for them. And the idea was to only use the picture frame, so to not add anything and to not take anything away. So that the cloth bit, the fabric, was the backing to a painting. I mean, I could take the images away, but I wouldn't add anything. So that was the backing material to the painting in the larger frame, which I just removed the painting and then kept the backing and brought it up to the next frame. And if I had to cut any bits off of the frame, I'd then reuse them somewhere else. So again, it's thinking very much of the sort of economy of making work. So this project went on for a while. And then this was for an exhibition I had. It was the first commercial space that I was showing with, and now with another one. But, so I try and make an exhibition that fits a space. It's always the first thing I want to see when I make a show is the physical space, and then try and make something. I mean, the art will have its own ideas, but you then want to have something that resonates within the space as well. And I thought all of these chairs, they were quite sort of romantic in a way, and a lot of character in them. So I wanted to try and get rid of some of that by putting them in a grid, so making it really, really formal. And this is the photos taken from the street as well, so it's a sort of shop front window. So it's very direct.